Welcome to the Nerve Guys podcast, where we discuss movement and well-being from the brain's point of view. Hosted by Gareth Kelly and James McCambridge, this week's episode is sponsored by the Neuroband, a wearable vision and balance training tool designed to develop posture, focus, and flow. More info at the end of the episode. Today we got another question asked by a listener. So once again, if you've got a question that you want to ask to myself or to Gareth, get in touch. Find us on Instagram, send us a message, and if we're able to answer it, we will do our best to give you an answer. And the question today is, what neurotraining should I be doing with my kid? I'm really keen to answer this. I'm hopefully not going to go off on too many tangents because I do a lot of work on kids development, kids learning, kids skill acquisition. If you got any other questions around like development milestones for kids and stuff like that, I'm very happy to talk about it on the podcast. So please feel free to throw any of those my way. And if there's enough interest, then yeah, we can do more kids episodes. But I guess with this question, it's specifically about, when we're talking about the vision work and the vestibular work and breathing exercises and lymph exercises and stuff like that, all the things that we do for adults to either improve injury or just mental or physical well-being, and all of that wonderful stuff. How much of it should I do with kids? And what does it look like? Does it look exactly the same as we do with adults? The answer to that is absolutely not. And yeah, do I even need to do any neuro work? So I guess let's talk first about why we're doing this stuff with adults in the first place. So one of the cool things really with the neuro work and the kind of advancements in understanding the brain is that we're able to maybe solve more problems than we once were just thinking about the body. And it might be a bit of a double-edged sword because it seems like the more we understand about the brain, the more we create more problems that then need to be solved. So, mental health is a pretty good example of this, where it seems like we've got a lot more mental health issues nowadays than we ever used to. And by understanding the brain, we actually get more tools to be able to deal with and fix that. But actually, at the same time, by understanding the brain, we seem to be also causing more damage. So we're kind of pushing things hard in both directions. We've got vision exercises and ways to combat eye strain, but we also got phones and laptops that are causing eye strain. So yeah, maybe we're only learning these things because of the damage we're causing at the same time. I don't know. But yeah, so why do we do it with adults? A lot of the time with any kind of this like well-being stuff or prehab stuff or vision vestibular balance, even strength training drills, the reason that you're doing the work is because you're not currently happy with the path that your brain and body went on over a certain period of your life. What I mean by that is, like, we do vestibular exercises to stimulate your vestibular system because you stopped moving so much. So let's say you became sedentary, or you became really ill, or you got a concussion, or drank too much alcohol, or spent too much time in moving vehicles where you couldn't really see much of the environment. Whatever the reason, your vestibular system has got weaker over time, for any number of reasons that it might get weaker. And some people, that doesn't matter. If all you really aspire to do in your life is go home and watch Netflix and eat uh, junk food all day, then it doesn't really matter that your vestibular system's not functioning well. Your brain's going to adapt to the environment that you're in. It's going to go, this is pretty cool. And as long as you're content within your surroundings, that's all that you need. But at some point, you might go, actually, kind of wish that I was able to play football. I remember I used to play football. Now I want to go do it again. And then you go play football, but your posture's terrible, or you can't see the ball, or you get really nauseous when you're running. And so you come see me, and we do vestibular exercise. Or we find out your vestibular system has got weaker over time, but it didn't necessarily get weaker. It just got better at adapting to the thing that you were doing. And the only reason it's a problem is that you're not happy with what you're currently doing right now, and you actually want to be the footballer, in which case, for a footballer, you do have a weak vestibular system, or whatever it is that we find out in our session together. And so actually time plays a really crucial factor in the amount of that kind of like prehab and strength and physio, or whatever you want to call it, all of those underlying things where you're trying to train those little small details. Time is a really big factor in that, and the longer you are alive, the more likely it is that you've started adapting your brain and body to one way of being, and so you're starting to close off doors of many other ways of being. And why that's interesting when it comes to kids is kids aren't like that. They haven't been alive for that long, so they haven't had long enough for their brain to steer away from all of these certain possibilities. So their brains are actually much more open and receptive to learning lots and lots of new things. So if you're not closing the doors, there isn't really much of a reason why you would have to do specific vestibular exercises or specific vision exercises. Those kind of things are for when there's a problem. So when it comes to like what kind of neuro training, a lot of the time when people are asking me that, I feel like it's in the similar vein of like, how much physio exercises should I give my kid? And the answer is no physio exercises if your kid isn't injured. How much Pilates should my kid do? If they like Pilates, then yeah, loads. And if they think it's stupid and they want to play tennis or video games or something, then probably not very much. Same with neuro. I wouldn't suspect that I'm going to meet very many kids in my life that love just tracking things with their eyes, or playing with what kinds of movements their eyes can make, or playing with specific breathing exercises, or things like that. But I would imagine there's loads of kids who, if you give them like a really big complicated video game, their eyes are going to be doing all of those movements all at once. Or if you get them to play tennis, then their eyes are going to be tracking things. If you get them to play archery or darts or something, they're going to focus really hard on one thing. So the wider the variety of things you can introduce them to, the more likely it is that they're going to keep each of those like sensory faculties, let's say, fine-tuned. And so as they grow up, the longer that you've exposed them to as many different types of kind of experiences and movement as possible, the fewer the doors that you're going to close permanently, or that you're going to close without a lot of work to reopen them. So, a kid who went to 12 different activity clubs in the week that were all different is probably going to have an easier time when they're an adult trying to learn something brand new than a kid who didn't do any, just stayed at home and played video games, or like, the parent was, you're going to be an ice skater, so we're going ice skating every single day. We're not going to do anything else. You're going to the Olympics. Maybe the kid goes to the Olympics, but they're going to be closing off doors and closing off avenues to lots and lots of different things. One of the coolest books to read if you're interested in this kind of thing, Range by David Epstein. Maybe Epstein or Epstein. David Epstein. Um, Let me check that because now I'm saying Epstein and I'm thinking of that other David Epstein. Cool. Wrote a book called Range. Um, and it's just all about how we think specializing is the way to go. We think specializing is the thing that we need to do, and we try to get people to specialize at things from a young age. But actually, the wider the base of things that we can expose ourselves to throughout our lives, the easier it is for us to adapt to new experiences. And when we eventually do find the thing as an adult that we want to be the best at, we actually find it much easier to problem solve in that area if we've had a wider range of experiences throughout our life. So the first thing in terms of what kind of neuro training for kids, the best neuro training for kids is to expose them to as much as you possibly can. And then the second part of that is what things do they actually like? So few things to bear in mind as a parent. I know one of the things that's really difficult is you got that anxiety of like you don't want to miss anything. You don't want to set a kid up for failure by not taking them to a certain class that was going to really matter later on down the road, or not helping them with something that was going to be crucial for their exams later on, and things like that. But one of the really important things to remember is, number one, even though brains kind of all do just work the same, there's a load of variance between brains, but the way that they work is generally, it's just firing of electrical signals. So there's a lot of similarity between the way that they're going to adapt to things, but there's a lot of difference between the actual physical structure and the content of those brains. So every kid is going to be different. Some kids are going to be visibly vastly different, but actually all kids are going to be vastly different from each other. So not every kid is going to be interested in everything. And the same, you won't be able to expose your kid to everything. There's just too much stuff. I had a friend who think still listens to these, so might recognize himself. When I had a kid, said like one of the coolest things is about having a kid is it feels like customizing your own video game character. You get to you decide what kind of clothes go on them. You take them to their different activities and classes, and your interests. A lot of your interests are going to be their early experiences of what like hobbies feel like, or what games feel like. So it is like that kind of like customizing the video game character, deciding on their appearance, but also deciding, they got that like stats bar for like speed and power and strength, or I don't know. And the more experiences you give them, the more you max out, or the more you increase each of those stat bars. So then the other thing to bear in mind is that, like, if you ever played one of those video games where you get to increase the stats, it gets really frustrating that you can never get them all to the very top. And that's just the same with humans, is you cannot have such a wide range of experiences that you turn into Jason Bourne. You just can't get everything maxed out. So at some point you are going to just be starting to close doors. But when it comes to like kids development and kids learning, paying attention to what they're actually interested in and trying to encourage that, especially at a young age, can go a really long way to getting them interested in more stuff later on in life. So in a lot of the research in like the top athletes and top performers, when they interview them, They go, "Oh, you're the best footballer in the world. You must have had the best coach right at the very start, like the most technical guy or best piano player or something. Surely you had like a virtuoso piano teacher." And it turns out, no, actually, the first experience they had of that skill, very few of them describe the ability of that coach or the ability of that influence. They just described how much fun they were and how great they were to be around. And so, they might have been virtuosos, but what was more important was getting them to feel like moving and playing, and this sport or this activity is just really fun and it's a great place to be. And then over time, when they've learned to have fun, then they learn, this actually, I like this as part of my identity. So now I'm willing to go through times that aren't fun in order to keep getting better. And now I'm willing to actually go out of my way to learn what I'm bad at in order to keep progressing and keep getting better at it. So while you're trying to encourage this wide range of experiences, it's also worth finding, whichever things kids are gravitating more towards, just encourage it, push it, go with it. And you might actually find that over time they start to become more interested in the things that you might deem as important. If it's maths and science and they're just only into dancing, well, maybe there's a way that those two things merge. But maybe actually, if you teach them that educators and teachers aren't just trying to bore you and force you into learning, and you actually give them an outlet for expression, then even if it does come down to the fact that you do have to force them to do some aspects of learning, it doesn't feel like you're stealing away their identity. So pushing them towards things that they like, very often that is going to let them play, explore, and actually you'll probably find when they get good at one thing and they enjoyed the process of learning it, they get more intrinsic motivation to learn more things. So when the world seems like an exciting place where learning stuff is fun, then why not learn a bit of math? Why not learn a bit of gymnastics or something else? Even if it was outside your comfort zone before, it's like, maybe I can give this a go. Um, so yeah, it's not always just because you think you know better than the kid, it's maybe not always in their best interest to be forced into a specific style of training just because you think it's the best thing for that age. Um, they might not end up professional athlete because they didn't get as into it. But if they weren't as into it at the beginning, the chances of that happening were a lot lower anyway. Like, if you have to force your kid to learn every single thing, and there's another kid with the exact same talent and potential that loves going in, and you can just leave them on their own, well, which one's going to get better over time? It's always going to be the self-motivated kid. So, uh, you know, part of the fun of life is just, first you got to figure out what kind of parents have I got, and then second you got to figure out, well, what kind of kids have I got. And we're not trying to make perfect, unrealistic, like idealist versions of this person. We're trying to work with the team that we got.
Thank you for checking out this week's episode. As always, we'd appreciate if you'd like and follow or subscribe. If you have any questions or if you're interested in workshops or one-to-one coaching from Gareth and James, send us a message on the Nerve Guys Instagram page. Finally, we'd really appreciate it if you'd check out the Neuroband, our very own product and the sponsor of this video. You'll find a link to the Neuroband in the description of this episode.